confirming the name. So your company is called, just to confirm, can you say Interesting. Please talk about this again when we start officially.
We'll restart with some questions. Let's go.
Oh, I thought that was already the first question.
No, how
is the first repeat question.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Actionable ESG Talks Series brought to you by AKFI, Actionable Knowledge Foundational Institute, the world's first nonprofit industry consortium committed to bridging the gap between ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. My name is Isabella. I am the co-host of this talk series. I'm here with another co-host, Manuel, and our awesome guest, Gene. Say hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi. Great. So this talk series, we try to bring together all the great minds to together discuss the current state and as well as the future state of ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. And again, I'm here very happy to have Gene join us today as the featured guest. And Gene is also on the AKFI's board of advisor as a board member. And he's a renowned expert in renewable energy project development and sustainability. He is a co-founder of a fintech organization, Cisco Score, an ESG sustainability rating agency providing Cisco Score reports for investors. Gene is also the co-founder of CRD Global LLC. He co-created the NQCRD, the first sustainability index with NASDAQ. He has over 20 years of experience with investment and market knowledge in clean energy. Once again, Gene, thank you so much for taking the time here. It's wonderful to have you. And I'm sorry you have to repeat the answer for the first question. Let's get started. Happy to have you here.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So usually we like to start with some broad overview kind of questions to hear about your thoughts on current state of the sustainability, ESG, and digital transformation trends in general. What are your thoughts?
That's a pretty general question, but I think where we're at right now, today, we've come quite a ways from where we started. Our originations were in 2008 and 2009, as you mentioned. We worked in the sustainability indexing product service area, creating that first sustainability index with NASDAQ. And at that time, there was just very little data. So unfortunately, it was very difficult to cull out the non-financial metrics and key performing indicators, and then drive those into a financial performance model and how they impact the public equities risk and or financial benefits or rewards. So that process, really led us to where we are today. At that time, we only had 50 companies that we actually could get the data, and we had to pull that data directly from CSR reports. Those are sustainability reports the companies were putting out manually. It was very difficult to verify the data. It was very difficult to find the data. And so, it's come quite a long way. Nobody really had interest back in those days. We were, as they say, beyond early. And now we fast forward to 2022. It becomes, at the very top of the list for this executive administration, for a lot of the very largest financial institutional investors globally. They're mandating new types of frameworks that are now involved with pretty much everything, any type of investment vehicle. They're starting to put it through the ESG lens. And we're getting also quite a bit now of compliance regulations from the regulatory environment from the European regulators and from the United States, from the SEC. They're all beginning now to require more of the non-financial data to be included in those reports. And so really it's like, if you want to think about flying from the Earth to the moon, kind of we're getting towards the moon now. And ultimately, what I see in this inclusionary environment is this automated reporting. So they're now, the whole industry, which is really a cottage industry, has grown into where the largest accountant firms are involved, and you have quite a number of other technology providers, midstream and downstream, that are involved now, that have been created and are growing and acquired, that actually are handling workflow management, data management, all the things that you think of that you would typically use in a business, but at enterprise scale to manage global operations of the data, which is very important, because we have to. Without that, we cannot really perform any analysis related to ESG risk, or the benefits or the rewards. So we really have advanced very far, and I think right now we're at a place where, when I think of the growth curve, I think we're getting closer towards maturity, but we're not quite there yet. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, you really are going to be what I call is guilty by absence. So initially, the ones that were the early starters in this, they were sort of the beyond earlies. Now what's going to happen is it'll be required, and investors will just basically look at every company and say, okay, where is your ESG guidance? What are the frameworks that you're now that you're using to manage your risks, your ESG risks, and where are they, and what are they, and how can we see them, and how transparent are you? And that all gets verified and validated. And there's a big term around greenwash, which everyone hears, greenwashing, but the reality is the ESG and those green frameworks have been used so liberally that it went the opposite way, went too far, to just putting out information that was just not validated. And thus what we have is a market that is a little bit confused. You've got the folks there and the companies that are putting out good information, very transparent, and very compliant, and they can validate that compliancy with data, and you can see exactly where it came from and where they're going, making commitments. And then you have other companies that are saying that they're doing certain things around environmental, social governance, but yet there is no real data behind it. There's no action behind it. There's no forward timeline framework behind it. So those are the ones that are under scrutiny. And what we're starting to see now is the regulatory bodies are beginning now to start to regulate. They're getting teeth behind these rules, and they will then essentially take these companies, financial institutions or public companies that are putting this information out there, and then they're literally regulating, meaning that you're now under an SEC compliance issue, and then they put that information out into the markets, and that affects the stock value and price. It essentially, if people cannot trust company or cannot trust financial institution or advisory, then they will move their money out of there, and those companies will be subject to fines and or other things. So it's a very long-winded answer, but we've come quite a long way now from where we are, and I think, like I said, within the next couple of years, we'll start to see just this environment of it's just doing business as usual and a must-have, rather than we'd just love to be able to do that. And companies are now scaling up, adding chief sustainability officers, sustainability directors, director of sustainability compliance, a lot of things that they didn't have a headcount or the ability to do, and they're adding software and hardware solutions that allow them to automate a lot of the data, which helps them achieve the goals that they have set out in their ESG and sustainability reports and reporting.
Last night, AKFI was invited to be part of a panel, and I'm giving you this almost real-time news with the SMBC Bank in Singapore, and PwC was the moderator, and also RegTech Canada, Regulator Technology Canada. So very much exactly what you are saying. Now, the finance industry is talking about green bonds and wants to make sure that risk is properly measured, which is the ESG correct measurement. And also the technology, they were talking a lot about AI, and this is actually was our part of the conversation, how AI plays a role in automating the reporting. You know, back to what you're saying, analyzing 50 companies based on CSR reporting is not exactly a scientific method, I shall say. Uh, so I wanted to move to the next question, which is really directly related to your experience. And I know you have so much experience that we can go over for a few hours. But in your opinion and with your knowledge, what are the challenges and opportunities that businesses must overcome to achieve really long-term sustainability and longevity? As you said, businesses and business management is at the end is to understand the risks, be prepared for the risks, to mitigate them or avoid them or insure against them, and or accept them. This is how a company can ensure its long-term sustainability and resilience and longevity. So, any nuggets you can share from your experience, or a few nuggets you can.
Sure, I appreciate that, Manuel. I think so. The challenge is really are companies accepting that this is not going away. The challenges of this, and I'm going to give you an example. I won't name the company, all right? But it's a very large electric car company who also makes batteries, whose CEO also sends rockets out into space and builds tunnels. Okay, this particular person,
not to be named, please, not to be named.
I'm not going to name him or them by name.
It's very hard to guess, Gene. It's very hard to guess.
What I would say is that most recently they were, eliminated from a very well-known, ESG index. And the argument came back that this is all a hoax, and this is just a bunch of BS. Why, we're the most cleanest company in the world. And what I can tell you in the challenge is that two things. First is that you definitely need a buy-in at the top. You need the C-suite to be all in, okay, for this to work, because it all rolls downhill. And if the very pinnacle at the top does not buy into this, then none of it is going to work, because the organization will say one thing but do another. Okay, that's the first problem that we have. And I think what I've noticed is just working with a lot of companies, it's a mixed bag. A lot of them are looking to do just the minimum to get by. Like, just what is the minimum we need to do to satisfy people so we can get through this thing? We don't want to waste a lot of time and money on it, okay? And that's a big problem, because they're really just sort of glazing over a lot of things that could be good or bad. They don't want to put a microscope on their company because they're worried about what might be found out, or, let's talk about the good stuff, but then let's not give you anything about anything else. We're just going to leave a lot of data missing. And that brings me to my second point, which is the data. Okay, and the challenge there is the data. We've had this challenge since we started our business. The data. We cannot do anything without data. And what we find is that companies, it's just like think about a child that comes home, okay, and he's going to bring his report card home to his mommy and daddy, and he's got some A's, some B's, and a couple F's in there. Okay, so now what he's going to do, he's going to take the eraser and just erase the F's, leave a blank. Okay, he's going to show mommy, look, I got an A and a B and a B and an A, and look, she's like, well, what about your grade in history here? I don't see anything. oh yeah, that one, don't worry about that one. That doesn't matter, And so this is where we're at right now. It's a challenge because companies are being very selective in their choices of data. And getting back to this person I was talking about in this great company, what we end up having is a lot of data gaps. I'm looking at all the profiles, and what I see on average, and we're only looking at 40 indicators for Susco score. We only look at 10 environmental, 10 social, 10 governance, and 10 financial. Pretty much every company delivers all the financial data because that's what they do for since the beginning of time. They do pretty well on governance because they have to do that as well. That's a requirement. But on the social and environmental, what we find is probably just out of those 40, on average, I'm seeing about 25% data gaps, 25 to 35% data gaps. That's a pretty big number. And out of only 40, 40 metrics. So when we look at some of our data providers like Bloomberg or Refinitiv, that now happens to be London Stock Exchange, there's over 400 key performing indicators and more on one of the other sites. So it's very important for companies to provide the data. And if you don't know like where they're at in terms of how bad they're doing, there's no benchmark for you to say, hey, they're improving or not improving. You have no way to correlate that. So what that ends up doing is it turns out to be a bad. Okay, a good is give us all your reports transparently. A bad is leave out data on purpose because you're a big company. You can provide any data. You got the money to do this and the resources. This isn't a small public company that has like 3 people working in it and they don't have the resources. So the end of the day is you have to expend resources to not only from the top down push the agenda and say, yes, we are going to commit to this and we're going to be compliant and even more so transparent. But then from the bottom up, we're going to go ahead and get that data and we're going to make sure that we transmit that transparently. We're going to provide that to analysts, to ratings agencies, put it out in the ecosphere on all these data providers that are there. We're going to make sure people know how good we do the good stuff. And we're going to let them know that there's some things there that aren't so great, but that's okay. We have a plan and the plan to fix those and make those better. And that's really what investors want. They know that certain things in mining or whatever industry you're in is going to be some bad things there. So knowing that and saying, look, we know these are really poor grades on these particular indicators, but here's our strategic plan to improve those over time. And when I think about that, that brings me to net zero and net zero commitments. Okay, a lot of these companies, organizations, institutions, particularly oil and gas, and they're making a lot of, and even countries, okay, we're all making net zero commitments, net zero by 2030, 2040, China, 2060. Sometime down the road, we're gonna get there. And it's great because I think that's sort of a lot of investment and a lot of dollars are going into those spaces. So people love to hear those commitments. But again, at the same time, it's you got to measure the data and you got to see, over time, what's the strategic plan? What are your benchmarks and milestones along the way to hit those numbers? If a company says they're going to be net zero by 2030 and now we're 2022, and let's just say they're 10% of the way there. You have a CEO that's in there. The guy knows he's leaving in 3 years, okay, or whatever. Now the next guy comes in 2025 or 2026 and says, oh, wow, we got 4 years to get there. They look at the data and they didn't have a plan. Well, then you're likely not going to get there just because of the reality of trying to do too much. It's not a free cost to get there. You have to spend money. It's time, it's effort, it's human capital, it's technology, it's everything all wrapped into all those things and investment into those net zero commitments and to impact. Okay, those are impactful, but you're not going to get there if you don't have that plan and saying, well, Jesus, it's 2022, we got 8 years. What are we doing the next year? What are we doing next year? Let's have an 8-year plan and show the roadmap of how we're going to get to zero by that date. So you could be very bad now, but here's our roadmap and we know what our budgetary requirements are, our expenditures are, a lot of smart people working in the industries that can calculate sort of what those costs are to get to those goals. Investors then look at that and say, okay, they've committed. It's committed from the top. It's in all their reports. They're being compliant. We can see the data. They've got investment commitments for the next 8 years. It's all laid out for us. I'm going to put money. Our institutional group is going to put money in that. They're engaged in frameworks such as TCFD. They know where they're going. They know what they're doing, and we have pretty good confidence that the risk is low, that they're not going to achieve these goals. Versus another company that makes a commitment, no plan, no transparency. Let's wait for the next C-suite to deal with this, and we'll just make the commitment. Sounds good now, and that's where I think the challenges are. I think
I would like to complement what you're saying, because I have a interesting position as an instructor, as a facilitator at Cornell. I see many of the students in the sustainability program coming and saying we can start it as a grassroots kind of movement and percolate it up. And I tell them, you need resources and you need cultural change. You need the cultural change to come from the top. So the company doesn't do sustainability as a cost center. It has to do sustainability as a process renewal, as a transformation process, as a digital transformation. So as you said, if it doesn't start at the top, I do not foresee how these mighty goals can be really realized, regardless how well and how good is the paper that are printed on.
Yeah, I agree with that very wholeheartedly. There are shareholder movements that can force the board into making decisions that way, but it's like pushing a rock uphill, and very difficult. And if it does start at the top, and they are working, the way they should, then they will achieve those goals. And your point well taken about digitizing and moving in the space. We have the technology to do it. It's just really about the commitment levels to do it. And so there's a tremendous number of challenges, Manuel, but the rewards. Looking at the flip side of the benefits and the rewards are immense. If you think about the social activity around doing these things, now you get really momentum going behind you. You get a tailwind. Okay, you're not in a headwind. You're actually in a tailwind. You're addressing everything on the front end. You put all the frameworks in place. You put the digitization, automation, and tools and technology in place. You made the investment. Okay, you did that. You made the commitment to do that, and now you get the financial benefit of that. Okay, you have the two opportunities. One is how does the environment impact our company on ESG, right? Is our company going to do well or not financially? And then what are we doing outbound to create impact in the world? Okay, those are two separate things, but they're interconnected because you have to have the commitment to do it. And once you do that, and once you put that into the framework and technology and your reporting, guess what? You get the financial benefits. You get a benefit of typically better valuation. You get a typically benefit of higher uptake of your equity shares by buy-side analysts globally, by institutional investors globally, and they look at the company as a very well managed, organized group with great governance and paying great attention to environmental risks and social benefits for impact. And I think once you do all that, then you shine. The company shines, and your competitors. That's the other benefit, is the competitors now have to play keep up. It's like the Joneses. They look at the competition, and typically when we do our analysis, we do a peer analysis, and we do peers. We compare companies to best in class on sustainability and their peers. And so if you're looking at 10 of your peers in an industry, they're all, they all have the right governance, they have the right frameworks, they're reporting better than you are. You start to see that their risks are minimal and your risks are greater. And therefore you may find that, it may be more difficult for investors to want to engage in your company versus the other companies?
And I think it's actually AKFI just contributed to the Security and Exchange Commission recently on a query about how greenhouse gases, specifically carbon dioxide, has to be reported together with the financial reporting of the company. So hopefully this message gets into the board of directors, gets into the executives, the CEO, the CFO, and not only they take it in a much more detailed and more focused on, but they understand the underlying cultural change the company has to go through. So it's not simply applying green paper over, the F marks, which in my mind I calculated it's about 25% of the reporting. So green paper will not help anymore, or greenwashing, or green anything in the reports.
Very true. And further to that, when you talk about, environmental and carbon, that industry has come a long way too. So you start to think about carbon accounting. In the early days, I've been in the energy business for a long time. Solar can make carbon credits, and there's carbon offsets, and there's lots of ways to, count trees, things of that nature. But as you start to get into these very large funds that are now reliant on the credits, and companies that are buying the credits, that industry had a lot of problems early on, double counting, reselling carbon credits more than once. And so now we're starting to include technology in there, and two pieces of technology I think are really interesting. Certainly one is when you take a look at, in some cases, where we're talking about forest plantations and things of that nature, starting to use satellites to really identify areas that are now being planted, and sort of the maturity level of those, and being able to sort of verify this data. The second is really the blockchain. We're really starting to see some opportunities there. This is going to grow, my guess is exponentially, where we have blockchain solutions taking cradle to grave. So we're talking about the very beginning of a project, doing all the paperwork, all the validation of that paperwork, going through the process and life cycle to the grave, to where they close out that credit because it was purchased or used. And that hasn't been the case before. It is now, but you're using a lot of carbon accounting firms and validation firms, and a lot of money to do all that. So that's all going to get cleaned up, and it's going to move a lot faster because of technology. And we're going to have some assurances that, when you're purchasing a credit or offset, that it's actually been validated. And there's a couple registries that are very well known, but those will even, you won't even need to really, engage in those so much, because you're going to know that these other, online carbon blockchain sources are secure all the way from the beginning to the end. And that's going to help out quite a bit, I think, with a lot of the challenges that are in that industry, and a lot of the costs involved in just validating and maintaining those credits.
So maybe it's sort of a redundant question at this point, but I think you cover how the leadership has to adapt to ensure really a sustainability and the sustainability in the business. But maybe in a summary, I think you said it has to start top down. It has to be throughout the company, and it has to be a serious reporting, not leaving blanks, as your example very, very visually said. I have the A's, the B's reported, and maybe one C, and the rest, the F's are sort of missing in action. So maybe in summary, if you can make 3 recommendations to a board of directors, and I'm sure you've faced that, and to the leadership of the company, what will be these three things you'll tell them?
Yeah, that's a good question, Manuel. I think the very first thing that I would share with the board is they have to make a commitment to integrate ESG into their DNA. Okay, this has to be part of the company. It cannot be a outsourced sort of like, hey, we're doing it also. It has to be as engaged as they do with what it is that they make. You know, if they're making or building a product or service, whatever it is, they have to look at every step of the way and every part of that in an ESG lens and say, okay, how do we integrate this in our DNA and make it part of our solution package? How do we do that? So that's the first thing, is integrating it into their DNA. Next step, which is very important, they need to invest in the human capital. You have to invest in the human capital that knows this space very well. Experts, people that do the job on a daily basis. They know how to integrate this in the DNA. They can make it happen. They're the thinker doers. Okay, they actually don't just talk about it through analysis paralysis, but they actually then do the job. And very similar to in the energy space, like ISO 50001, which is really around superior energy performance, and it's something separate, but you have to act. You have to actually figure out what is going to be the best beneficial bang for the buck energy wise and make that move. There's no like, maybe we'll do it. You're committing to that. So human capital is probably going to be the greatest resource because that will actually then force the rest of the things to happen that need to happen. And then the last is make that investment in technology. They absolutely need to invest in the proper technology, whether it's blockchain, something around framework and data management. They all invest in CRM, Salesforce, and all these other big data things that they need to manage their whole back end of their company. It's the same with this. They cannot avoid it and say, well, we'll just use spreadsheets and we'll have the human capital person we just hired deal with that. That is a waste of time and money. So you have to make the investment in the human capital, and then you have to give those people the proper tools they need to accelerate this. Once you do those three things, DNA, human capital, and technology, now you have the sort of the three legs of the stool for success in that company to excel and deliver on their promises and create results they're transparent and that investors can feel very comfortable about, in terms of they know that the company's got it in their DNA. We can see that from the top. There's the human capital. There are the people there that know this business. They can get the job done. And oh, by the way, we could see they've invested in the technology to get them there. So there's an investment in both human and technology capital. We feel pretty confident they will deliver on those results, and they'll provide us those benefits.
Excellent. And before we move to the final question, I want to congratulate my co-host, which can I talk about it?
Of course. Anytime.
She's about to launch her first book. And it's I'm not disclosing too much, but it's about the digital mind of tomorrow. And this dynamic between humans and machines, and where we're going to end up, exactly what you said about investment in human capital, investment in technology, and of course start from the top with a strategy which is appropriate for sustainability. So Isabella.
I definitely love to share a coffee with Gene as well. He seems a little interested in it.
I would love to read it. I've certainly, what I love is that I love that you're actually, writing about things of this nature. It's important, it's very easy to say stuff, but to actually read it and do it is really the value here. And people get, knowledge is power. So they really, it's what you do with it. Obviously, you can read a book, but if you don't engage and actually do something, then there's little value to it. But I think the fact that you're putting out something and it's written in black and white, it's very important because, well, you're helping others and through your lens. And so I applaud that. That's pretty awesome.
And
Appreciate.
it's a book of questions, not only solutions, right? So to get to the right solution, we have to ask the right question. And I really had the privilege to look on an early version, and I can tell you, you'll end up with more questions, not necessarily on how to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Well, the good news about questions is then you have to look for answers. So that's the key, right? Is
Right.
looking for answers. We're all looking for an answer, and you can't always just Google something. So you have to kind of actually put some effort into the answers. So that's very, very cool.
Especially to piggyback on my mentality from writing the book and the discussion from you guys, I was thinking when you were talking, the issue we're facing, it's more deep. It's a deeper kind of situation than the service, like to execute some practice or to fix some artificial, superficial problems. For example, you were mentioned about how the leadership should proceed, and what I heard, correct me if I didn't get it quite right. I heard two root problems. One is the awareness to begin with. You outline a lot of benefits, what could be done, what are the flipping side, but apparently seems there's awareness issue, and the second thing is about the commitment issue, and both are quite deep. And commitment, it sounds to me, I love to for you to kind of clarify that it's a battle between a short-term result outcome to prove their credibility versus a long-term journey, long-term plan, long-term goal. And did I get it right? And it sounds like
You're,
that really
yeah,
put
you
as a
you're
roadblock.
you're you're exactly right, and this really is at the heart of a lot of the challenges that we face in the way our system is structured. Okay, most companies that are public, if you know, they report and they report quarterly. So they're going 90 days at a time and they're reporting quarterly. So they're really, it's difficult for many companies to go out farther than that. They just say, how are we doing this quarter? How are we doing this quarter? Oh, we had a bad quarter. Let's get rid of the CEO. Let's get rid of this guy. Let's add this guy. Great. We had to get, it's like horses. We can't wait. The guy goes around the track one time and then we're like, oh, that horse isn't moving right. Let's get rid of him. So, the challenge is part of that is our whole mentality. It's been discussed in the past about sort of changing the reporting from quarterly to maybe something different annually. And I'm not going to make the argument which is better, but even as a country, we tend to take things short term. Our and not to get too far off the path, our presidency, we go 4 years, and they work hard for 2 years, and in the next 2 years they're working on getting reelected. And I'm not saying other countries are better, because there's a lot to do about freedom and democracy, but there are certain ones that have a 40-year plan. Okay, these are a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a 40-year plan. If you look at let's just take a look at Amazon. All right, Amazon had a plan. It was a long-term plan. They weren't doing so well in the beginning. He's like, look, this is the vision. It's a long-term plan. We might not make money for a long time, but the long-term plan is this. Okay, we have a real strategy. There's a real commitment there to do that. And so that created a really good result. And we weren't looking from 30, 90 days and 90 days. Oh, it was a bad quarter. Get rid of the guy. Otherwise, and you start swapping out human capital. Before you know it, you're just trying to get that like Rubik's Cube. Let's get the right guy in there. We'll make the right decision. You have to take a long view. Okay, yes, the short view is important for investors. You have to take a long view. And so to your point about commitment and awareness, you really need somebody who, and at the very top, the team is aware. They're aware of what's going on in the environment. They're aware of what the competition is doing. They're aware of the financial industry, and they're aware of the situation that they are in as a company, where the shortcomings are. They're not like brushing them under the bridge or under the carpet and saying, yeah, we're not good in any of those areas, so let's just focus on what we are good at. But let's actually address these items. So the awareness is really the first part. And then the commitment is really saying, okay, this is going to be painful. We've got to take our medicine. it's like working out. No one wants to go in the gym in the first couple of months. You're really sore. Your body's beat up before you actually start to see the results. You don't see the results right away. It's invisible. You go to the next quarter and they go, "We're burning money. What's going on? We're burning money." Another quarter, like, why are we not having such good financial quarters? Well, we're committed and we're aware of what we need to do in the market, and we have some environmental and social challenges, and therefore we're adding human capital. We've made a commitment to add ESG into our our enterprise and into our DNA. And now we're also making technology investments. And so that's a difficult task. And to get through it as a leader, they don't get a lot of wiggle room. If you make a mistake, they're like, "Well, we don't want that much ESG, so let's get rid of that guy because he's not helping us over our quarterly commitments to make money." So this is the challenge that we're faced with as a country and investors as a whole. Everyone wants what's called instant gratification. Instant gratification is very shortcoming because then you made a little bit of money that quarter, or it was positive. You higher top line, lower your bottom line. You did certain great things, but ultimately, where's the long run in the event? You may have won that battle but lost the war. You really got to look at what your strategy is and long-term goals. Make those short-term goals committable, and you have to actually communicate that to the financial community. Your investor relations team and everybody needs to communicate what you're doing so that the leadership in the company feels good about talking about it, and they're not worried about getting their head on the chopping block for making those investment decisions that in the short term may cost some company some money, but in the long term provides great success. And so we're in that dichotomy of short-term vision, long-term vision, and our is the leadership team and the management and the board willing to make those commitments and willing to stand by them and put it out there.
I'm gonna swap the last question with my creativity. How would you see your company, yourself, fit into this process in pushing forward this movement?
Really, I think what we focus on is making the companies aware. We're part of the awareness, okay? Because
I love that.
well, you think about it, you don't know, a parent doesn't know, or the investors don't know how well the company's doing on environmental social governance unless they're made aware. So they need to be made aware by companies that are reporting. Now, that being said, there's a lot of reporting companies. So you've got many different ones, and this is becoming part of the market confusion too, is to sort of which ones to prescribe to, which ones to consider. But what I've found is that a lot of the investors in the investor community, they take kind of a breadbasket approach. There's a lot of different methodologies around sustainability reporting and around the analysis of those things for ratings and reports. And years ago there weren't any ratings and reports, very few, and now you've got more than I can count. So at the end of the day, you have to decide, okay, let's at least prescribe to, we are going to be looking at these reports. That's going to make us aware of the company's situation and their transparency, their compliance, their risks, their lack of transparency, their lack of commitment, right? Those are the things that we're going to look at as an investors. So we're making the investors aware, and we're also making the companies aware. And what I could tell you is there's only so many key performance indicators. We've figured out that these 40 are probably the biggest drivers across the board in the market. There are very specific ones to very specific industries that are more meaningful. But in general, if a company is willing to do the work because they're aware that they need to report effectively and put this data out there, then what will end up happening is then they'll get the benefits of that because of what it is that we're doing. So we're like the step where we're the report card, okay? And you're going to know where you got an A, where you got a B, where there might be a gap of data, and where you may have a failure. And that's okay. Look, somebody who got an F in a class, or a company that had a really bad score, guess what they get to do? They get to say, look, we did really bad, We know why we did bad. And guess what
Mm-hmm.
we're going to do? Here's our plan to do better. Next
Mm-hmm.
quarter, we're going to do this much better. We're going to work hard at it. And next quarter, this much better. And our 5-year plan is this. And our 10-year plan is this. And so now that awareness creates commitment and action. That's really the key to the whole thing. Without it, you're not going to get anywhere. So, we are part of a cog in a wheel, and
Mm-hmm.
we can also do some consulting work, but primarily it's really around allowing the investors and companies to know where these companies stand and
The
where
rule
they
of three. Sustainability and ESG in the DNA. If it's not there, don't start.
That's right.
Human resources, technology to support the human resources. That's my 3-line summary of a really, really, really in-depth analysis and very many thoughts that and many questions that you leave us with as much as answers. But I'll turn it back to Isabella. I think she has a few closing words.
Amazing. Yeah, I really enjoy the conversation because you really see the core problem and you were trying for decades, actually, if you count it from the beginning, in moving this forward. And definitely, we love to be part of this process as well, starting by having this conversation. So thank you so much, Jean, for being here, taking this hour-long talk with us. Really appreciate, and also thank you all, my dear audience, for being here. Make sure you're tuning in every week for a new episode of AKFI's Actionable ESG Talk Series. You will gain new perspectives on how to mitigate risks, as Jing mentioned, looking at a long-term plan and really create value by integrating ESG with digital transformation. So until the next one, for now, goodbye. Thank you, Jean, and thank you, Manuel.
Bye,
Bye,
Jean, and
Manuel.
thank you,
Thanks,
Isabella, and
AKFI.
thanks, Jean.